In its Greek and Latin origin, plague meant a blow, something sudden and acute, and in general parlance it has often been employed as a generic term, applicable to almost any calamity, and to pests like locusts, as well as to human and animal diseases of many kinds. The sense in which it is used in this book, and in many larger works on which this one draws, is more precise, though still sometimes contentious. Plague is the word that has been used over the centuries to denote an epidemic disease of particular severity and dramatic impact, a disease which probably always had the same causative agent, now known to have been a bacillus, Yersinia pestis. Across most of its recorded history, plague has been distinguished from other epidemic diseases in two ways. First, it killed more people more quickly. In major outbreaks in European cities between the 14th and 17th centuries, it was not unusual for 1/4 of the population to die within a year, and it is likely that just as many more might have been infected and then have recovered. In terms of mortality and morbidity, plague's only rivals may be the smallpox which Europeans took to the Americas after 1492, and the worldwide Spanish flu of 1918 to 19. Each of those disasters was undoubtedly of great historical significance, but neither has left the long-written record of recurrent epidemics that allows the history of plague to be written. The second distinguishing feature of plague, evident from the long series of records, lies in the special horrors which it inflicted on its victims, and which threatened all those around them. The more elaborate descriptions, most of them surviving from the 14th century onwards, commonly refer to the extreme delirium, fever, and painful tumours of the sick, and to the putrid matter issuing from their sores, mouths, and nostrils, which could contaminate anyone nearby. "The breath is so stinking," one French physician recorded in 1666, "that it is virtually intolerable." Thus the common proverb in French is true, "One smells of plague." Easily sensed and identified, polluting whole cities, that cause of private suffering and collective disaster has, since at least the 6th century AD, been given the same name, plague or pestilence, pestis in Latin, and sometimes the plague or the pestilence. This book will focus on the history of the disease in major epidemic form, so far as that is known, and in periods when its ravages were most pronounced, down to the first decades of the 20th century. Since the 1920s, partly thanks to public health measures and modern antibiotics, plague has been less serious as a human affliction, but it has not disappeared. It persists among animals in many parts of the world, though not in Europe, and flares up occasionally in isolated epidemics, minor in comparison with those of the past. Since 1990, however, the number of human cases has been rising. Between 1,000 and 5,000 are being reported annually to the World Health Organization, many of them in parts of Africa and Asia where there had been none for several decades, and plague is now classified as a re-emerging disease. In its late 20th century manifestations, plague is certainly much better understood than it has ever been. Since the 1940s, it has been the subject of extensive research, prompted in part by the possibility of its use in biological warfare or terrorism. And there are now many scientific papers and statistical studies about its prevalence, its animal reservoirs and carriers, and its clinical impact on human beings. The findings of modern medical science about plague's causes, its etiology, and its incidence in distribution, its epidemiology, have illuminated many aspects of its history, but they have not removed all the uncertainties surrounding it. On the contrary, they have given rise to considerable debate about whether all the plagues of the past can have had the same cause as those of the present. Plague or not? The scientific techniques of pathology, bacteriology, and epidemiology, developed by investigators of cholera and other epidemic diseases in the 19th century, were first applied to plague when it suddenly erupted in the cities of China and India in the 1890s. The